Good evening, everyone. Okay, Gopal, in order for us to jump right in, and me as well, if you could pop up my slides, and I'll go into that immediately. So VUCA has been a term that came out of the War College in the US and about 25 years ago. And it is an explanation, a clarification on what has happened in the military in terms of going from the Cold War, which was very large forces engaging with each other, to much more of a guerrilla type war. Right the week after 9/11, VUCA was brought into organizations, to business, and it's remained there. And really, it's a military term by excellence, or by essence. So the word that we're now using, we've updated that. And if you hit me with the next slide, we've taken this from the Oxford Business School, the SIAD Business School at Oxford. And we're now changed that as business into TUNA. And TUNA stands for turbulent, uncertain, and the most important word, novel and ambiguous. Novel is the key. What we're seeing in digital transformation, the IR 4.0, et cetera, is a whole raft of novel business models, ways of doing business, et cetera. Like Facebook never existed 12 years ago. Airbnb didn't exist. All of these business models are completely novel. And as a result of that, we need to look at it in that regard. So so I use the word tuna, but the remainder of the evening, the other guest speakers will probably be using VUCA. But I think we need to slowly but surely address the issue of novelty in this context. And I'll be doing that this evening. If you hit me with the next slide. Now, tuna we've been talking about, or VUCA we've been talking about for quite some time. And we've never really had a perfect example of what that represented. So we talked about 9/11, we talked about this and that. But COVID-19 is actually a fantastic case in point of what tuna really is in action. Now I'll just take you through some of the elements of why that is. Why is it turbulent? Why is it uncertain? Why is it novel? And why is it ambiguous? For example, today the official statistics are that we have 6,866,309 cases identified around the world. And in terms of deaths, there are 398,551. Those two statistics, we are certain of one thing and one thing only, is that they are wrong. They are wrong in terms of the number of cases by far, and they are certainly wrong in terms of the number of deaths. So this is the official number, super detailed, that doesn't mean anything. That's already an element of complexity and ambiguity that is coming into this. For example, in terms of transmission, we were first told through, really in January, that the element of man or human-to-human transmission could occur from China. That was really late January for the first time. And then it came in and said, well, it's only through contact, right? Because the size of the virus is such that it really doesn't get airborne very far. So therefore you will pick it up on your hands and you will put it on your face, and that's how you get it. So we believe that, and that's what we worked with. And then doctors and nurses started dying from COVID at a great rate in hospitals because clearly it was aerosol. And then we look at transmission rates and we start seeing transmission rates are far too high to be this contact just off the surface of hard surfaces, and that we transmit it to ourselves. So there is an aerosol component. And just today, WHO has put out new guidelines that we should all be wearing face masks, right? That is brand new today. It's 5.5 months into this pandemic. And only now do we know that we should be looking at aerosol as well as contact. You know, which one is it? And in which proportion? We don't know. And the question is, well, when will we know? Well, we'll know sooner or later, but it will be too late by then, right? This is an element of complexity. We cannot know in the moment that we are in today where we are, what is a cause and what is an effect. And one of the bigger elements is for example, the infection rate. We have multiple data points from the US Navy, from Iceland, from a town in Lombardia, in Italy, et cetera, that are pointing to, we have somewhere between 5% and 50% of the people who have COVID who are basically asymptomatic. If we have 50% asymptomatic, then this idea of aerosol is not really very big. It's probably through contact. If it's only 5%, then aerosol is big. So they're interrelated. They basically depend one on the other. And we don't know which is which. But we know that these two elements could be linked. They may not be. We don't know yet. The infection itself, the pathology of this illness is extremely bizarre. It's so novel, right? First of all, we're told that it was pulmonary, the upper respiratory that would then go to the lower respiratory. So it's like pneumonia. First it started out, it's like flu. No, it's not like flu. It's like a pneumonia. No, it's not like a pneumonia. It has nothing to do with pneumonia. And then we got COVID toes coming out about 8 weeks ago. COVID toes is basically a capillary issue. And Kawasaki disease in the children is exactly the same thing. So it's attacking somehow the finer veins, which could also mean that's exactly what's happening in our lungs. So it might not even be the normal issue of pneumonia. There's also this element of taste and smell. About 30% of the victims who get it lose their sense of taste and smell. Smell is okay because that's something that can be blocked, but taste, that's neurological. At least that's what the neuroscientists are saying. So now it's like, well, it could be neurological. And then they're looking at it, so well, maybe the people on ventilators, well, that could absolutely be a neurological phenomenon in the brain stem. And then last but not least, there are people who are dying of embolisms. They also are dying from immune system overdrive. So is this also an inflammation of the body? Is it everything? Is it nothing? Is it all? We don't know. So, and we can go into susceptibility. We can go on even into immunity. Is there no immunity to this? Can you get different versions of it? Is there a long-term immunity? Is there short-term? We don't know. And we won't know for quite some time. Same with the vaccination, et cetera. So this is a perfect example of everything getting mixed up and us not being able to separate the separate threads and how they interlock. That is tuna. Right? And what we're looking at in business is very much that element. And for that, we then need to look at, well, how can we find ourselves in something like this? What are the directions that we can get? And if you hit the next slide, Gopal, next slide, we basically rely on the model that's called the Connolly model. Now, two things about the Connolly model. First of all, Connolly is not spelled and pronounced the same way at all. So that's the first mix up. The second element is that this looks like a very strange model. And it isn't a model, it is actually a topographical map. We are looking at a map, we're not looking at a model. That's very important to know. So Connolly is a Welsh term. It means where I am from. It is an indicator of location. And so what I want to spend the next 2-3 minutes about is talking about this map, because this is the key map to everything that we do when we talk about tuna, VUCA, and in terms of agile leadership or complex adaptive leadership. So we'll start on this map in the lower right-hand corner, which is the southeast, and with the obvious. The obvious is basically a region of this map where really everything can be known. This is a region where a best practice can be established, meaning what? Meaning that cause is always the same effect. So if I do A, I will always get B, right? And this is where then you can set up an SOP, you can set up a practice that will be the best. And in this case, we talk about sensing, categorizing, and responding. And if we move now north, and we go into the next, over that hill that's drawn there, and we go into the complicated dimension. And the complicated dimension is obviously, as the term says, there are elements where cause is a function of effect. What does that mean? It means that there are multiple ways that you can get the same element. So you can, for example, when you ship an item, right, you can use sea, you can use ground transportation, you can use air. There are different ways of getting this done. And depending on what you have as an input, as a cause, you can get a different response, right? So basically air, yes, it gets there quicker, but it's much more expensive, et cetera. So you can use, in the complicated world, you can use experts, you can use content, knowledge as the basis for your decisions, no issue. So this is a world, the obvious and the complicated world, both that side of our map are worlds that we're used to, that we've been taught about. That's what we're taught in business school. We are the masters of content. We are the leaders through our knowledge, right? You can't be a CEO before you're 45 because you need to have the knowledge and you need to have the exposure. So that's the world of old. Where this map comes in handy is as we move to the West from complicated and we end up in the complex region. In the complex region, cause and effect are intermingled. And I just went through that lengthy explanation of COVID to basically explain the fact that we don't know what is up, what is down, what is causing it, what isn't causing it, how are they interacting. We just basically have to try. We have to try by probing, right? We don't know the answer. I'm going to run this test. I'm going to run this experiment. I'm going to look at these two different segments and try to figure something out. Is there a relationship or isn't there? And so in the complex world, what happens is that we actually have to what's called probe. A way of visualizing this is to think about the oil and gas, right? We don't know if there's oil and gas underground. So we take a machine and we drill in, and then we pull out a core and we look at it, we examine it, we try to figure out from what we're seeing whether or not there's something underneath there. That's exactly the same thing that is happening in all aspects of business now if you are in a complex environment. And the last one, if we move down south now, again, we're in a chaotic situation. In a chaotic situation, it's basically, you just got to get out of there. Chaos would be if you're in a house on fire with your family, you're not going to stand around and say, how volatile is the material here? You know, where is the source of the flame, etc. You just get out. And so therefore, in a chaotic world, you act. You don't worry about, there's no cause, there's no effect, you just get out of it. But let me come back up again to the complex, because the complex is really what this is all about, the complex region. There are no answers that we know. So therefore, we are no longer the masters of content. What we have learned may actually be detrimental, because what worked in the past will not work in this environment. So we have to find a whole new way of running our businesses, a whole new way of thinking about how we work. And what I like about this particular rendering, because there are many renderings of the Connolly framework, is that this one has this red arc in it. That red arc means that there's a lot of leeway between complex and complicated. And there's a lot of leeway between chaotic and complex. So you can have part of your problem or part of your business is sitting in the complex dimension, and other aspects of the business are still complicated and still there. So we're living in this whole world, we're living in this map all at the same time, but we have to figure out how to work in a complex world. And that's what I want to spend the next bit on, is what do we do? How do you practice this? So if you look at the next slide. So basically what this is about is how do we lead when we don't know? And for that matter, we will ultimately know, just like COVID, we will ultimately understand COVID, but it will be too late by then. It will only be in hindsight, and hindsight doesn't help us move forward in a complex environment because it changes all the time. The dynamic is too great. Right? So this is about leading when we don't know. What is the things that we can do? So let me go to the first slide. The first step that you need to do when you're in a complex situation, and this is a situation that we're in today, hit the slide. The slide. Is that we basically have to be honest, and we have to say, I don't know. That is the hardest thing for a leader to say, because we're taught to know, and we're supposed to know. And this is a fantastic example. This is Switzerland. It's March 11th. The Swiss government is under all sorts of pressure. There are 1,100 of their citizens that have died. They have made no comments about anything about this pandemic. And right south of them in Italy, in the state of Lombardy, which is still one of the worst epicenters of the disease. People are dying everywhere. And so what happens is the government and the head of government breaks into all medias unannounced and basically says, we have a problem, right? We don't know what's going on, but we promise you that we will do our utmost to find out, and we will get everything done as we can. We don't have any solutions right now. So therefore, we're going to make some mistakes. We're going to try. We're going to make some mistakes. Please be patient with us. And the third element is that we're going to be transparent. We're going to tell you everything we know all the time. We're going to come on every day and we're going to tell you. And that's what's happening certainly in Malaysia, right? Every day we have an update on where we are at, what's happening, who's where, what's going on. And the last one that they say is that we need your help. You need to get involved. You need to basically shelter at home. If you go out, you need to wear a mask. You need to wear gloves. You need to be socially distancing. And you basically need to help us. You need to ensure that we can cover this. That changed the Swiss mentality from one of disorientation, of frustration, of these politicians are lousy, to one where basically they said, we're with you. And Switzerland has turned everything around on the simple basis that they stood up and they say, we don't know, and we need your help. So that's a very powerful, absolutely essential first step. It's something that if you're a leader and you're used to leading from the front, you got to practice in front of a mirror. You got to be ready, because Monday morning you're going to have to go in and tell them, I don't know. I don't know, but we can find out, and I need your help to get there. Those are the words that are absolutely essential. That's step number one. Step number two, if you hit the next slide, is basically, if we have this map, right, the conniving framework, the question becomes, you know, where is our north? Where do we point our ship? What are we going to do? And there's a very simple solution to that, is that everything you do from this moment forward is about your customers. You have to understand their needs. You have to understand where they're going, what's happening to them, right? Now, in this MCO, in our lockdown period, all of us have been going online and talking to friends and alumni and people that we haven't talked to in a long time. So we're all getting really used to FaceTime and things like this. And my question to you, if you're a business leader, have you been talking to your customers? And if you have you been spending the vast majority of your time with them? The reason is twofold. One is that they will guide you. They are the only direction that you can generate. The second element is that they don't know themselves, so therefore their minds are changing as we go. So you have to constantly be updated and constantly be in contact with them and follow them, right? Key here is, remember, we're in a complex situation. So asking the customers what they're doing, you're not going to get answers because they don't know what they're doing. But together, you can start probing things. You can try things with each other. Now, I've been talking to a lot of our customers in the last month and a half, 2 months, a lot. And what I'm hearing is something else that's very bothersome. Is I hear that the leaders are all sitting around on on Zoom or whatever, having these conference calls with each other, trying to figure out how to run the company remotely. That is the worst thing that you could possibly be doing. You have no business trying to run as a leader in a complex situation stuff alone. You need as many people from different opinions and different ways to be able to get to communicate and to work together. You need to open up, don't close down. Don't sit there in a C-level meeting trying to figure things out. You don't know the answers and they don't know the answers. Open up. And then most importantly, talk to your customers. Spend your time with them. They at least have a possibility of giving you directions. That is an incredibly important point. Step number 3 then is that once you have some understanding of the business risks that if you can hit the next slide, Gopal. Once you have a better understanding of the risks that are in your business as a result of where your customers are going, et cetera, you need to start identifying and prioritizing your risks and opportunities. And you do this via what this wall looks like, which is Post-it notes, but you can do it also online with Trello or with Slack or any of these other software programs. They basically are built to be for this reason. And the idea here is that you open it up. You bring it in, certainly all of your subordinates and all of your workers, because they have ideas, they have knowledge that you may or may not know. They have perspective. This element is bringing your customers, bringing your suppliers, bringing your network, open up and get ideas so you can understand the risks better. Just don't worry yourself in a corner. It's going out and talking that you'll get this. And you have to prioritize those, because in prioritizing, now you can go to step number 4, which is the next slide. And step number 4 is, Once you've identified your risks and opportunities, you need to form what we call business sprint projects. Now, we've heard agile projects before, and agile projects and the idea of sprints and scrums and all these terms comes from software development. And they work really, really well when you're developing software and trying to debug software, but they don't work as well when we try to bring it into normal operations. You actually have to transfer and translate the elements of what we call agile leadership and agile projects into business sprints and business projects. And there are a few tools and techniques for that. It usually takes about a day of understanding and training, and then a couple of weeks to rotate through one or two of these sprints before your organization understands it, and then you can do it on your own. You can learn this stuff on YouTube. It's out there. Google has done a fantastic job. They have basically put all this up online, so you can learn from it also online if you want. But typically we spend about 6 weeks with clients, taking them through, coaching them through this process, because this is the key process to moving quickly and effectively, right? What are these teams going to do? That's the next slide. Basically, these teams are going to be working on next slide is about, now that you have your team, a couple of things have to happen. The first thing is, as a leader, you have to form the team with as much diversity in it as you can possibly get. So take the engineer, take the salesperson, take the operator, take the secretary, take the driver, take whoever you want who is a different perspective, and put them together. And the number one thing that they have to do as a team is they have to have what's called psychological safety. That is your key metric as a leader to ensure that your team can work effectively. Google did what's called the Project Aristotle. It took them 4 years of internal studies. They looked at 150 teams. They did reams of data. And this is what they came up with, is that psychological safety, if it's in the team, it will work. If it isn't, it will not work. So you have to ensure psychological safety, which is this idea that everyone feels safe to take risks and to say what's on their mind, to be vulnerable to the others, that they'll be heard and that the others will take that into consideration. You know you have psychological safety in your team if and when, at the end of a 1-hour meeting, say with 6 people, each one of them has talked between 5 and 10 minutes. Everyone talks in the psychological safety, and everyone says what's on their mind. That's the key. And then there are 4 other ones, which is dependability, structure in terms of who does what, the meaning of the team, but that's already built into it because you're working on customer-related issues and risks in the business, and then obviously impact. And there's a 6th element that we add to this, and that is diversity. Absolutely key, essential to that. So once you have the team, they're working on their priority, they're now working together, what are they going to be working on? And that's the next slide. That's step 6. You basically have to use the tools and techniques that are out there. This particular tool is used universally. It's called the Javelin Board. It is the one that really goes at the key assumptions that you have with regard to having identified the risk or the opportunity. And it's there to bust. You want to bust your assumption. You want to make sure that that assumption is correct, or if it isn't correct, that you kill it, because your idea will never work. So you always go at the key assumption. You do that through the Javelin Board. Here again, this information is available on YouTube. There are all sorts of elements of Javelin boards that you can look up and study. So, but that is a most useful tool. We use it all the time in startups, and now it's being extremely useful for businesses in the so-called post-COVID world. Step number 7 is the next slide. The idea behind the concept of a Javelin board is that you need to be looking at building what's called a minimum viable product. You will need to change your offer based on the fact that we're in a complex environment and that your customers have new needs, and therefore there need to be new products and new solutions. But don't build that product from scratch to all the way up to the full model. You have to develop this idea of a minimum viable product. What is the minimum thing that I can build and give in front to my customers for them to try to see if it works for them or not? Keep it low in cost, keep it, how should I say, as simple as possible. And a lot of our clients use like cardboard models, or they use these websites if you're on an online business that basically just very basic, but get the key elements of what they're trying to do or trying the message across, and have customers play with it and get reactions. That's your data. That's your probe. A minimum viable product is your probe. So learn about minimum viable products and use them. They're hard to do at the beginning because we always have this concept in our mind. We have to have a finished product to offer to our customers. Not at all. You need just a minimum quality product to be able to, for them to try, because the end product is going to be different than the one that you have in mind. I can guarantee you. Remember, the clients don't know what they need. They know that they need something new. So give them chances to try. Then the next slide. Once you've built your MVPs, what you're looking to do is you're looking to build this, what we call virtuous circle. You build your product and you have to measure the result. You get measurements of the results through the customer journey, their story about how they would use this product, what was useful to them, how would they use it differently, what were the things that were missing, etc. That generates data. That data allows you to learn, and from that learning, you either build a better model, or that learning tells you it's not going to work. And that's what we call doing the pivot. And one of the hardest things to do in this new world is to pivot, because basically we all taught that we love our products. We love what we do. We put all our energy into it, and I have to kill it. I have to move on to something else. That's not cool. But if you look at the very successful startups, they've all pivoted multiple times. Facebook didn't start out to be Facebook. Airbnb didn't start out to be Airbnb. If you look at where they started and where they ended up, two completely different worlds. And that's because they do this build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn. When you go on Facebook, every single time you go on Facebook, something's changed on that page because they're experimenting, right? They moved the button here, they moved the button there. They've changed the background. They've done this, they've done that. Here's another offer. Here's another game. Try this, try that. That's not by accident. That's by design. And all they're doing is MVP, and they're using you as the feedback loop. Okay, next one then. So basically, the next slide is really this idea of you have to learn to pivot or persevere. When do you give up on an idea? When do you give up on it? And how fast and you know, and what we normally see is that people hold on to their ideas way too long, and therefore they go down this road that's not going to lead them anywhere. Now, to be fair, when you start off with an idea, a new product, a new service, it's going to take multiple iterations. You're going to have to persevere, and sometimes it's very frustrating, but you'll get there in the end if you listen to the client and if you move it with it. So that's basically what you need to do. Very practical, hands-on. This is an approach that works, and this is an approach that will help you get out of this morass. When you're looking at cutting costs, for example, fine, you need to cut costs. I understand that. But don't cut costs just to cut costs. Look at it from the point of view of what can I cut in my costs that won't cost anything to my customer, service-wise, product-wise, quality-wise. You need to preserve those elements. So cut costs from the perspective of the customer, keeping the customer in mind. That's the way that you need to approach all that. So the last slide then for me. Oh, sorry, it's not the last slide. Before last slide is that basically it's talking about your mindset. So what we're talking about when we talk about the Javelin Board, when we talk about MVPs, et cetera, is that you need to fail. You will fail. The idea is that you need to fail early, you need to fail quick, you need to fail often, and you need to fail cheap. And that's what the pivot allows you to do. But it is really, really critical that you look at this stuff in a very critical point. About 70, 80% of all ideas will fail. They will not pass the muster. But every so often you get a few that are able to move forward. Rely on those, build those. Forget about the others. And you need new ideas all the time. You need to be probing all the time. You need to be talking to your customers all the time, right? Every day, all day. So the last slide then, now I'm truly on my last slide. is basically this idea of you need to move from being the leader of content, the master of all, the one who leads from the front only, to really becoming much more of a servant leadership. You don't know. So that's fine. Bring the people together, right? Be humble. Say you don't know. And then work together. And you do that by putting the customer at the center of everything you do. You use teams to develop the solutions that you've identified as potential. You use tools and techniques that are already out in the market that have been proven in that work. Practice psychological safety. And psychological safety is basically everyone feels comfortable expressing themselves. And you do that by practicing it yourself, asking questions, coaching, etc. That's basically it. It's as simple as that and as hard as that. It's not easy to do because it's stuff that we have never been taught. It's not the way we were taught. It's not the way that we think about management or leadership, but it is the only way that we know that is proven effective. And we're learning this from the Googles of this world, from the Microsofts of this world, from the Intels of this world, the people who are still out there and are gathering tremendous speed and volume. Amazon, these people are all using these tools and techniques, and they work at the micro level, at the SME level, as well as at the MNC, the GLCs, etc. It's just a matter of practice and a matter of doing. So that was my part. We'll take, I guess, questions at the end. Please, happy to answer any when we come to it. So Ron, over to you.